I didn't even have time to scream before the world tilted and I hit the cold, muddy water. For a moment, the shock of it stole my breath, and then the pain in my knee screamed louder than my voice could ever manage. I clawed at the slick sides of the ditch, my fingers sliding on wet earth as icy water soaked through my clothes. Above me, Ryan stood on the road, his silhouette framed by the fading glow of sunset. My husband, the man I trusted more than anyone else in this world, stood with his arms folded and a smile on his face. You really thought I'd spend my life tied to you? That I'd let you keep that beach house? His voice cut through the trees like a knife. Thanks for signing it over, Olivia. You just saved me a fortune. For a heartbeat, I couldn't process what he'd said. My own signature on the deed to my grandparents' beach house, the only piece of family I had left. I'd trusted him when he said it was just for the renovation loan, that we needed it under his name temporarily because he had better credit. I had believed every word, because that's what you do when you love someone. But looking up at him now, with that cold, smug look on his face, I realized I didn't even know this man anymore. Ryan, why? My voice cracked, more from betrayal than from pain. Why? He laughed, short and cruel. Because you're naive. Because you thought marriage meant something. Newsflash, Olivia, it doesn't. He stepped closer to the edge and crouched. Just enough so I could see the contempt in his eyes. Stay here for a while. Maybe think about how stupid you've been. Then he straightened, brushed invisible dust from his jacket, and turned away. The sound of his footsteps crunching against the gravel faded, followed by the distant rumble of the engine as his car roared to life and disappeared into the night. I was alone in the middle of nowhere, cold, wet, and shaking not just from fear, but from the realization that my life had just been ripped apart by the person I loved. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My body felt like it had shut down, my hands trembling too much to grip the edge of the ditch. Then anger surged through me, raw, hot, and fierce. I pressed my palms into the mud, digging my nails in until I found leverage, and dragged myself upward. My knee screamed in protest, a sharp ache radiating up my thigh, but I didn't stop. Inch by inch, I pulled myself out, rolling onto the side of the road with a sob that wasn't just pain, it was heartbreak. Lying there under the bruised purple sky, I thought about the beach house, my grandparents' laughter echoing through its halls, the summers I'd spent there as a child collecting seashells with my grandmother. I'd signed it away to a man who had just left me for dead in a ditch. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. Crying wouldn't save me. My phone. I dug in my pocket, but it was dead, a black screen staring back at me. Of course it was. Ryan had made sure I was isolated. My hands curled into fists as I forced myself to stand, favoring my injured knee. I had two choices: stay here and risk hypothermia, or find help before the night swallowed me completely. I chose to walk. One step, then another, along that desolate road lined with trees whispering in the wind. Each movement hurt, but every step I took was proof I wasn't as broken as Ryan wanted me to be. I whispered into the dark, just to hear my own voice. You won't destroy me, not like this. The road stretched ahead like a ribbon of darkness, broken only by patches of moonlight slipping through the trees. My knee throbbed with every step, sharp and insistent, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The sound of my breathing filled the night, ragged and uneven, while the echo of Ryan's words kept looping in my head. Thanks for signing it over, Olivia. You just saved me a fortune. I wanted to scream, to cry, to curl up on the side of the road and give up, but something inside me refused. Maybe it was anger, maybe just the simple will to survive, but I kept moving. Somewhere ahead, a faint light glimmered through the trees. I squinted, focusing past the blur of tears. A porch light, someone's home. Relief washed over me, so sudden and powerful that it almost buckled my legs. I limped toward it, one hand on the trees for balance. By the time I reached the wooden gate, I was trembling so hard I could barely stand. I hesitated for a second, afraid of who might answer at this late hour, then lifted my fist and knocked on the weathered door. It creaked open almost immediately, and a warm beam of light spilled across the porch. A woman stood there, her gray hair pulled back under a knitted cap, eyes narrowing in worry as she took me in. "Oh, dear, what on earth happened to you?" she asked, her voice firm but kind. I just need help," I stammered, shivering in my soaked clothes. "My phone's dead." "My knee." She didn't let me finish. "Come in, child, come in right now." Inside, her home smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. She guided me to a chair, fetched a towel, and placed a steaming mug of tea in front of me before I could even protest. "I'm Helen Moore," she said gently, crouching to inspect my knee. "Looks like you took quite a fall." "You could say that," I whispered, staring into the tea, watching the steam swirl like ghosts of memories I didn't want to relive. Helen looked up at me, her brow furrowed. This wasn't an accident, was it? Something about her tone, steady, knowing, safe, broke through the wall I'd been holding up. I told her everything. The ditch, Ryan's betrayal, the beach house, my signature on the deed I thought was just a formality. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking again, but not from the cold this time. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. "You're safe here tonight, sweetheart. Tomorrow we'll go to the police and figure this out properly. You don't have to face this alone." Her words sank into me like warm sunlight on frozen skin. For the first time since Ryan shoved me into that ditch, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. She showed me to a small guest room with a neatly made bed and a handmade quilt that smelled faintly of detergent and lavender. I sank onto it, clutching the edges as if they could anchor me to reality. My clothes were still damp, clinging cold to my skin, but the warmth of this place seeped into me anyway, warmth I hadn't realized I'd been missing for a long time. Helen returned with a first aid kit and knelt in front of me. "This will sting a bit," she said softly, cleaning the gash on my knee. I flinched but stayed quiet, letting her work in silence. For a moment, I felt like a child again, like someone finally cared enough to patch up the pieces Ryan had shattered. When she finished, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Get some rest, Olivia. You're safe here. Tomorrow we'll deal with everything else, one step at a time." Safe, it was such a simple word, but it hit me hard. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She left quietly, pulling the door until only a sliver of light cut across the room. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the old heater and the distant rustle of trees outside. The pain in my knee throbbed in time with my heartbeat, but exhaustion finally pulled me under. For the first time since Ryan's betrayal, I slept without the weight of fear crushing me, because someone, a stranger, had shown me kindness when I needed it most. Tomorrow would bring questions, police reports, and the brutal reality of what Ryan had done. But tonight I was safe, and that was enough. I woke to the smell of coffee and the soft clinking of dishes. For a moment, I didn't know where I was, then it all rushed back. The ditch, Ryan's cold voice, Helen's kindness. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knee. It hurt, but it was manageable. Today, I told myself, things would start to change. Helen greeted me at the kitchen table with a warm smile and a plate of toast. "Eat up. You'll need the energy. We've got things to do today." "Thank you for everything," I said quietly. She waved me off. "We take care of each other out here. Now finish your coffee. We're going to the police." The drive to the small town station was quiet, broken only by the hum of the old truck and the pounding of my heart. The building was modest, almost nondescript, but stepping inside felt like crossing into another world. I had never filed a police report in my life. I had never thought I'd be that woman, the one who needed protection from her own husband. A young officer at the desk looked up and nodded politely. "How can we help you today?" My voice shook at first, but Helen's presence steadied me. I need to report an assault. My husband pushed me into a ditch last night, and he tricked me into signing over my family's house to him. The officer frowned, motioning for me to sit. Let's take it one step at a time. It felt strange telling the story out loud again. Every detail, every humiliating piece of how I trusted him. By the time I finished, my throat was dry and my hands ached from gripping the chair. The officer typed quietly, then looked at me with measured seriousness. We'll document everything and open an investigation into the assault. As for the property issue, that's going to be a civil matter, but it sounds like there may have been fraud involved. You'll need a good attorney. Helen nodded firmly. We know someone. My niece used him for a property dispute last year. He's good. Which is how I found myself that afternoon sitting in a warm, book-lined office, facing David Samuels, a tall man in his 40s with sharp eyes but a surprisingly kind smile. I've heard the basics, he said, adjusting his glasses, but I want to hear it from you. Every detail. I told him everything again, how Ryan had convinced me to transfer the title so he could get a renovation loan, how I trusted him, how he'd throw me out once it was done. David tapped his pen thoughtfully. That's fraud and coercion. We can challenge the transfer. It won't be easy, but you have a strong case, especially with the assault as context. We'll file a petition to have the deed, transfer voided, and pursue charges if possible. You'll also need a safe place to stay until we know what he'll do next. Helen leaned forward. She can stay with me until she finds something permanent. I felt a lump rise in my throat again. I don't even know how to thank you both, David smiled faintly. Start by promising you won't give up. Men like him count on silence. We're not going to give him that luxury. For the first time since Ryan shoved me into that ditch, I felt something close to control. It was fragile, but it was real. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about taking my life back. I thought I'd have at least a few days of peace to figure out what came next. I was wrong. It happened on the second evening after filing the police report. I'd just finished dinner with Helen and was about to take a shower when I heard it. Tires on gravel, then the crunch of heavy footsteps on her porch. Helen froze, her hand on my arm. Stay here, she whispered, moving toward the door. Through the small window, I saw him. Ryan. His car was parked crooked in the driveway, and he was standing there like he owned the place, wearing that same smug expression I had seen in the ditch. My stomach knotted instantly, my pulse loud in my ears. Helen opened the door, just enough to speak through the crack. You need to leave. Ryan tilted his head, eyes locking on me over her shoulder. Olivia, come on. We need to talk. His voice was soft, almost pleading, but I knew that voice. It was the one he used when he wanted something. Always sweet at first, before it turned sharp as glass. I have nothing to say to you, I said firmly, though my hands were trembling. He smirked. You went to the police? You actually think they can help you? You signed the house over Olivia. It's mine now. And you? You're just embarrassing yourself. Helen stepped between us, her shoulders squared. You heard her. Leave, or I'm calling the sheriff. Ryan's jaw tightened, the fake charm slipping for just a second. His eyes hardened as they landed on me again. You think this is over? You're making a mistake. One day soon, you'll regret this. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I felt it in my bones, but I held my ground. No, Ryan. The only mistake I made was trusting you. For a moment, his face twisted into something I had never seen before. Pure anger, stripped of any pretense. Then he stepped back, raising his hands in mock surrender. Fine, have it your way, but don't say I didn't warn you. He walked to his car, slammed the door, and sped off, gravel spraying from his tires. Helen closed the door and locked it twice, her face pale. We're calling the police again, she said firmly, already reaching for her phone. When the deputy arrived, I gave another statement, my voice shaking but steady enough to get through it. They said they'd note his visit and consider an emergency protective order. It felt good to hear those words, protective order, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see him. Later that night, lying on Helen's couch, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second of his visit. The way he'd looked at me, like I was an enemy instead of a wife. A chill ran through me, but there was something else too. I wasn't crying this time. I wasn't broken like before. Fear was still there, but underneath it was a growing fire, a stubborn refusal to back down. Ryan thought he could scare me into silence. He had no idea who he was dealing with now. 2 days later, just as I thought things might calm down, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. Olivia, it's Mark Daniels. You don't know me well, but I used to work with Ryan. My grip on the phone tightened. Why are you calling me? There was a pause, then a low exhale on the other end. Because I think you're in danger, and because I can't keep quiet anymore. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop in town. I chose a table by the window where I could see everyone coming and going, my nerves on edge. When Mark walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Slightly hunched, eyes darting like he expected someone to follow him. He sat across from me, hands wrapped tightly around his coffee cup. I need you to understand something, he began. Ryan isn't just being vindictive. This was his plan from the start. He talked about marrying someone with assets, a beach house, inheritance, something stable. Then he met you. My chest tightened. You're saying he married me just to take the house? Mark nodded, shame flickering across his face. I didn't think he was serious at first. I thought he was just talking big, you know? But after the wedding, he bragged about how easy it would be to get you to sign everything over. And after it happened, he said Mark swallowed hard. He said he'd deal with you if you ever tried to fight back. The coffee turned sour in my mouth. Deal with me, what does that mean? Mark glanced around the shop before leaning closer. He said you'd end up in the hospital if you made things hard for him, that you'd learn your place. For a moment, the room tilted. The Ryan I'd loved, the man I thought I'd known, wasn't just selfish, he was dangerous. Why are you telling me this now? I whispered. Mark's eyes dropped to his coffee. Because it's gone too far, and because you deserve to know who he really is. I'll testify if I have to. I'm not proud of staying quiet before, but I won't let him hurt you. I sat back, my pulse pounding. Do you realize what you're saying? If you testify, he'll come after you too. Mark gave a bitter laugh. He probably will, but I'd rather live with his anger than live knowing I let him destroy you. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on both of us. Then I reached across the table, covering his trembling hands with mine. Thank you, you don't know what this means. He nodded, his eyes glassy. Just be careful, Olivia. He's not done. He wants that house sold fast. He's already talking to buyers. You need to act before it's too late. I left the coffee shop with my heart pounding. Fear and determination tangled together. Ryan wasn't just trying to scare me. He had a plan, one that didn't include me in it. But now I wasn't alone. For the first time, someone besides Helen and my lawyer believed me and was willing to stand beside me. Whatever Ryan had planned, I would be ready. I wouldn't let him win. The call came from my lawyer early the next morning. His voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're holding back frustration. Olivia, I just got word Ryan is actively listing the beach house. He's meeting a potential buyer today. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That house, my grandparents' house. Where? I asked, my voice sharper than I expected. Cannon Beach. I can file for an emergency order, but it might not be processed in time to stop the sale. If you want to stop him, we need to act now. Minutes later, I was in Helen's old truck, a bag slung over my shoulder and adrenaline burning through me like fire. Helen insisted on coming along. No way you're facing him alone, she said, gripping the wheel with the calm strength of someone who'd seen storms and survived them. The drive felt endless, though the miles flew by in a blur of trees and coastline. My mind kept flashing back to summers in that house. Shells lined along the windowsill, my grandfather's laugh rolling like the tide. The thought of strangers walking through it, talking about countertops and flipping it for profit, made my stomach churn. When we arrived, Ryan's car was already in the driveway. Two people, a man and a woman, were standing on the porch, looking around like tourists on a casual afternoon. Ryan was there too, animated, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. I didn't even think. I just walked up the gravel path and called out, "Ryan!" He turned, surprise flashing in his eyes before it hardened into irritation. "What are you doing here?" "This is my house. You're not selling it." He laughed, the sound hollow. "Your house? Olivia, you gave it to me. Remember? That's what those papers were for. Those papers were fraud, and you know it." My voice trembled, but didn't break. "I've already filed. The court knows everything. You sell this house, you'll be violating a pending case." The couple on the porch exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan shot them a tight smile. "Give me a minute," he said to them, then stepped closer to me. His voice dropped low. "You don't want to do this in front of strangers. You're embarrassing yourself again." "I don't care who's watching," I said, my fists curling at my sides. "You conned me, Ryan. You assaulted me, and I'm done being silent." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe even fear, but he masked it quickly. "You think a little police report will save you? You think a judge will take your side? You're weak, Olivia. You always have been." "Not anymore," I said softly. "I have witnesses now, and you're not touching this house again." Before he could answer, Helen stepped up beside me, her voice firm. "You heard her. This ends now." The buyers, sensing trouble, quickly left, murmuring apologies as they hurried to their car. Ryan cursed under his breath as they drove off, then glared at me. "You think this is over? You just cost me money, Olivia. You'll pay for this." I stood my ground, even as my hands shook. "No, Ryan. This time, you're the one who's going to pay." We left before it escalated further, but the fear lingered in my chest like a cold stone. Still, when my lawyer called later to say the emergency injunction had been granted, officially blocking any sale, I felt the first flicker of real victory. For once, Ryan didn't win, and I wasn't done yet. The emergency injunction felt like a lifeline, but Ryan's threats still echoed in my head. He didn't take failure well, and I knew stopping the sale wouldn't be the end of it. That night, Helen's porch light flickered as a truck rolled slowly past her property, twice. I caught a glimpse of the driver through the window, and my stomach tightened. "Ryan." Helen called the sheriff immediately, but by the time they arrived, the truck was gone. The deputy shook his head, apologetic. "Without him stepping foot on your property or making direct contact, there's not much we can do beyond documenting it. You might want to consider a protective order." It felt like trying to build a wall out of paper, flimsy against a storm. But I filed for the protective order anyway, clutching the paperwork like it was armor. Even so, the anxiety clung to me. Every creak in the house made me tense. Every unfamiliar car set my pulse racing. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at Helen's kitchen table staring into a cup of tea when she joined me, her face soft with concern. "You can't let him take up this much space in your head," she said gently. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." Those words stuck with me the next day when she introduced me to a local support group for women who'd survived abusive relationships. Walking into that church basement, seeing a circle of women who all carried some invisible scar, I felt exposed, but also strangely safe. One woman, Clara, smiled at me warmly and scooted over so I could sit beside her. "First time," she whispered. I nodded. "It was mine too, once. You'll get through this." The session was simple, sharing stories, offering encouragement, but it was powerful. Listening to women talk about reclaiming their lives, their homes, even their sense of self. I felt something shift inside me. For so long, I defined myself by what Ryan had taken from me. My house, my trust, my safety. But maybe I could define myself by what I was taking back. After the meeting, Clara pressed a small card into my hand. "That's our number. Anytime you need to talk, day or night." I thanked her, tucking it carefully into my wallet like it was a key to something I hadn't realized I needed. Back at Helen's, I opened my laptop and, for the first time since the nightmare started, thought about the future. Not just surviving court or winning back the house, but what came after. I applied for a part-time teaching position at the community center and even started sketching ideas for restoring the beach house once it was legally mine again. Ryan had taken so much, but he hadn't taken everything. Not yet, and not ever again. When Helen peeked in on me later, she smiled at the sight of me hunched over the keyboard. "That's more like it," she said softly. "That's you taking your life back." For the first time in weeks, I smiled back without forcing it. Maybe, just maybe, I could start over. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a mix that somehow made my nerves worse. I sat at the long table next to David, my attorney, clutching a folder filled with every piece of evidence we'd managed to gather. Across the room, Ryan lounged in his chair, one arm stretched along the backrest like he was at a casual lunch instead of a legal hearing about fraud and assault. His eyes met mine, and that smirk appeared again, the one that used to charm me but now made my stomach turn. David leaned closer, voice calm and steady. "Remember, today's not about winning the whole case. It's about showing the judge why the deed transfer was fraudulent and why this needs to go to full trial. You tell the truth. I'll handle the rest." I nodded, gripping the folder until my knuckles turned white. The hearing began. Ryan's attorney, slick suit, slicker words, argued first, painting Ryan as a loving husband simply trying to manage finances for their shared future. According to him, the transfer had been voluntary, a mutual decision, and any claims of coercion were emotional misunderstandings. I could feel my pulse rising, but David's hand on my arm kept me grounded. When it was our turn, he stood and spoke with calm precision, laying out the evidence. My testimony about the coercion, the timing of the transfer, Ryan's abrupt move to sell the property, and, most importantly, Mark Daniel's statement about Ryan's long-term plan to take the house. The judge listened quietly, occasionally asking questions. Then came my part. I took the stand, my palms sweating as I swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Grant," the judge said, "can you explain why you believe the transfer of the house was not voluntary?" My voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. I told them everything. How Ryan had convinced me it was temporary, how I trusted him, how that trust ended with me in a ditch. At one point, I saw Ryan smirk at the mention of the ditch, like it was all a joke to him. That smirk lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. "I loved him," I said, looking right at Ryan. "I trusted him, and he used that trust to take the only piece of family I had left. That house isn't just property, it's my grandparents' legacy, and I will fight to protect it." For the first time, Ryan's expression faltered, just slightly. After a short recess, the judge returned with a temporary order. The property transfer would be frozen until the case was resolved. Ryan couldn't sell or alter the house. It wasn't the final verdict, but it was a victory when I hadn't been sure I'd get. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath and felt something inside me ease. David clapped me gently on the shoulder. "You did well today. Really well." Helen, who had insisted on coming for support, hugged me tight. "You see, you're stronger than you think." Ryan walked past us then, close enough for me to hear him mutter, "This isn't over, Olivia." I met his glare with steady eyes. "You're right. It's not. But this time, I'm not the one who should be afraid." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in him, and it gave me strength I hadn't felt in years. The morning after the hearing, I woke up without the crushing weight I'd grown used to. The fear wasn't gone, but it wasn't running the show anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had choices again. I spent the day on the phone with the community center, confirming my part-time teaching position. It wasn't much money, but it was mine earned on my own terms, and that mattered more than I expected. In the afternoons, I started walking down to the beach near Helen's house. The air was crisp, smelling faintly of salt and pine, and each wave that rolled in seemed to carry a piece of my anger back out to sea. I'd sit there with a notebook, sketching ideas for how I'd restore my grandparents' house once it was legally mine again, sanding the old floors, painting the shutters that had faded to a pale gray, even planting a small garden along the fence line. One evening, Helen joined me on the porch with 2 cups of tea. "You're different now," she said, watching me over the rim of her mug. "There's light in your eyes again." I smiled softly. It feels like I'm finally breathing again. Like I'm not just surviving, I'm actually living. Part of that was because of the people around me. The support group had become a lifeline, women who knew exactly how betrayal felt and how heavy starting over could be. Clara, the woman I'd met my first day, had become a close friend. She helped me find small ways to celebrate progress. Cooking dinner together, painting my nails like I used to before I stopped caring about things like that. Even Mark, the unexpected witness, checked in now and then. He'd stop by after work, always a little awkward but sincere. One afternoon, he brought over a tray of flowers, bright purple and yellow blooms, and said, "For your new garden. You know, once all this is behind you." I laughed for the first time in what felt like years and promised to plant them. Slowly, I stopped feeling like a victim. I started to feel like myself, maybe even a better version of myself. The Olivia who'd signed over her home out of blind trust was gone. The new Olivia understood her worth and her boundaries, and she wasn't going back. One night, I stood in front of the beach house, still sealed by the court order but undeniably mine in spirit, and whispered to the wind, "You tried to break me, Ryan, but I'm still standing." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the life I wanted. I could picture it so clearly. Warm lights glowing through restored windows, friends laughing on the porch, a life filled with people who cared instead of people who used me. For the first time, I believed it could happen. A month after the hearing, the chill of winter had begun to fade, and with it, so had the heaviness that had lived in my chest for weeks. The beach house still sat under the court's protection, its fate tied up in legal proceedings, but something had shifted inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped by uncertainty. I felt free to imagine what came next. That morning, Mark stopped by with a box of tools. "Figured we could at least clear the porch," he said, nodding toward the house. His voice carried a mix of hesitation and hope, like he wasn't sure how much space I'd allow him to take up in this new chapter of my life. I hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yeah, let's do it." We worked in silence at first, sweeping away months of salt and sand, tightening loose railings and washing down the windows until they caught the light like new. At one point, I caught him watching me with a faint smile. "What?" I asked, brushing hair from my face. "You just look different," he said softly. "Happier." And he was right. I was happier, not because everything was fixed, but because I had stopped waiting for someone else to make me whole. Later that afternoon, Helen arrived carrying a pot of golden chrysanthemums. "For your porch," she said, setting it by the steps. "A fresh start deserves something beautiful." I touched the petals gently, my throat tightening. "Thank you for everything." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let this house be the thing that defines you. It's just wood and nails, Olivia. You, your strength, your kindness, your heart. That's the real home you're building now." Her words sank deep, and for the first time I believed them. That evening, we sat on the porch, the ocean stretching endlessly before us, the sound of waves soft and steady. Mark handed me a packet of seeds. "Thought maybe you'd want to plant these wildflowers. They grow fast, fill up empty spaces." I stared at the packet for a moment, then smiled. Empty spaces, yeah, I've got a few of those. We planted them together, our hands in the cool earth, while Helen arranged her flowers on the steps. The setting sun cast everything in gold, and for the first time in a long while, I felt rooted. Not just to this place, but to myself. Ryan's shadow was still out there, somewhere, but it no longer held me down. I wasn't afraid of him anymore, or of what was coming in court. Because even if I lost the house, I'd already won back something more valuable. My life, my voice, my sense of worth. As the first stars pricked the sky, I whispered to myself, almost like a promise. They tried to take everything from me, but I found something greater, myself. Helen glanced at me, smiling knowingly, while Mark pressed the last flower into place. It was a small moment, quiet and ordinary, but it felt like the start of everything.